few quick words on history. You will hear from different factions what they think was the first fermented beverage. Okay. Problem with this is that dating as far back as close to 10,000 BC in area known as the Fertile Crescent, which was in Mesopotamia, they have found remnants in crocks and other vessels of a mixture of grapes and grain and honey in different various amounts that all date back to about the same time frame. So from my reading and my experience, here's what I think. And this is just, you have to count it as being me, I'm not an expert. Basically, with the lack of transportation availability and the lack of refrigeration, you had to make do with what you had at hand. Sugar cane was available in areas like Asia, China, Japan, marshy areas, because it is basically a marsh grass. But unless you had the technology to process it and know how to break it down into what you need to ferment with, you really wouldn't have access to it. So I don't really do a whole lot with sugar anymore. The recipe that is in that handout is my original recipe that I put together for ciders, and it calls for 1 to 4 cups of sugar depending on your taste and the sugar content of the juice that you're going to use. One thing that you want to talk about when you're looking at ciders, right now if you think about cider, you automatically want to think of apple. Okay? Again, not everywhere grows apples. The best apples for cider making actually come from Great Britain. Okay? In the book Golden Fire, the story of cider, the author talks about the fact that in the Americas there is not a bittering apple that is sufficiently bitter to make a proper cider. The closest natural apple for cider making, for bitterness, is actually the common crab apple that grows wild. Okay? But there again, cider does not have to be just apple. If you can make a cake mix off the back of a box, you can brew. It's really not that difficult. You will actually have more problems picking up the terminology for everything than you will doing the actual brewing. Okay? So what we're going to start off with tonight, we're actually going to do what I refer to as my bruised cider. It is black and blue. It is blackberry and blueberry, okay, primarily. Okay, I already have in this 2-gallon fermenter, one thing that you want to remember to start off with is that you want to leave a certain amount of headroom, because as the yeast starts to expand and come awake, the froth on top of the liquid will expand, and if you don't leave enough room, you will have spewage here. So what I have here are 6 bottles, 1 quart size, of just blueberry organic blueberry juice. Most of your juices today are going to be already processed to the point where you don't really have to worry about any unhealthy bacteria or pathogens or anything else in them. They've already gone through the process. So we don't have to worry about heating them up. I am actually heating up my honey, which is what I want to add to it to give it a little bit more of a fermentable sugar than the blueberries themselves and the blackberries. And that's just to kind of punch it up, give it a little more alcohol, you know, when it finally finishes out. Give it a little bit more oomph and give it a little more flavor profile. In addition, we will be adding some vanilla beans and some sweet orange peel. All right, I've already placed a certain amount, about 2.5 jugs of the blueberry juice into this 2-gallon fermenter. Prior to y'all walking in this evening, everything was actually sanitized, and there's different types of sanitation you can do. You can do sanitation by boiling. You can do it with bleach. However, with bleach, you have to worry about the fact that if you don't rinse it properly, you're looking at bleach flavored alcohol. Okay?
Not popular.
Not really popular. And if you're using plastic fermenters and they get any kind of abrasive inside of it where it scratches, it will hold. I mean, if you've ever put a greasy food in a plastic container in the microwave and it's got any scratches, you bring it back out and it's stained permanently. Think about that stain being bleached. It just stays in there forever. Okay? What I recommend is a no-rinse sanitizer, powder brewery wash or professional brewer's wash, Star San, and there's a couple no-rinse, 5-star. Those are actually some reputable no-rinse cleansers that will help you out. I actually have a solution of that in this bucket here. It's got all my apparatus and tools and stuff that I'll be using tonight. I'll go over those real quick. And I also have a little forehead rack for my sweaty forehead that will be kept separate from everything else. All right. So, what we have, so I'll go over this right quick. We have a, right now I'm drawing a blank, a hydrometer. And that basically you take a original gravity when you finish your brewing process, before you start fermenting, before you pitch yeast, and then you take another reading after the yeast is finished out, and the difference lets you do with a mathematical equation to figure out how much alcohol content you have, if you really care about your alcohol content. Of course, we have a handy thermometer. And then I have a brewing spoon and a brewing paddle. Very good for stirring, very good for getting oxygen into your must. And must is the pre-fermented wine, or in the case of a beer, that would be called wort, which is W-O-R-T, but it's pronounced wort. And right now what I'm doing is the honey that I'm going to be using for this brew is being heated up so it pours out more readily and I don't have to sit here scraping the bottle or anything else like that and waste your time. All right, I have taken a few time-saving steps to kind of save everybody a little bit of time up here. We're using two different yeast. For this one, we'll be using Lavalin EC1118, which is a real good wine yeast. It's also good if you have a stuck fermentation. Basically, there's too high of a sugar content. You actually can't have too much sugar in suspension, where it basically won't allow the yeast to really grow properly. This is really good if your sugar content is too high. You can get it at any brewing store. If they don't have it, you can generally call them up and they can order it. And this is a dry yeast. Basically all you have to do is put a little warm water out. I generally proof mine, which proofing is just basically allowing the yeast to waken up on their own and come up to temperature and wake up before you really put them in with the mix of everything else. When I'm doing ciders, I generally tend, in meats as well, to add dry yeast directly to the juice so it has some sugar content already to start feeding off of and to wake up. So what it is, pour some out of this, put the yeast in it, and shook it up. All right, what we have here is a muslin bag. It's just a small grain bag is what it is actually. And we are going to open it up. And I've already sanitized the cutting board as well. And I don't want a whole lot of orange flavor, so I'm going to use about a quarter of this bag. And then on the vanilla beans, we're just going to remove one out. And I'm just going to score it. I'm not going to scrape it or slice it completely all the way through. I'm just going to score it because I don't want an overpowering flavor of vanilla. I just want it to kind of have just kind of a residual taste. And we're going to tie that off. like I said, I've already added some of this juice mixture in here. And since this has already gone through the process to remove any kind of bacteria or anything, we could just add it straight in. Now for the blackberries, I'm actually using whole blackberries. And these have been sitting in my freezer for about a week. And the reason for freezing them is so that you get what's called maceration. And what that is as it freezes, it forms ice crystals within the fruit, which penetrates membrane and cell walls and causes the juice basically just to all linger together and makes it more readily extractable from the actual fruit. And as I don't want to get my precious digits all dirty, we're actually just going to add them whole and let the yeast actually eat them from the outside in. Okay? Plus they'll get a little bit mashed up when I stir. And then what we want to do is really oxygenate this, get a lot of oxygen pulled down into it so that yeast have every opportunity to get enough oxygen to really get going really well. And then the last thing I want to do is add this honey. Now the honey I've actually turned on very low, and it will bring, this juice has actually been sitting outside, so it's actually kind of cold. So this honey should just bring it right up to about the right range to really wake everything up. And for this one I'm using clover honey. It's a little bit cleaner taste. It really won't off balance the mixture of the juice and the fruit. There. Go ahead and seal that one. And make sure that the container, the carboy, or the fermenting bucket as it's called, is well sealed and airtight. This has a bunk stopper, which is a rubber circle that goes around a small hole in the top of the lid that fits airtight with the airlock. And the airlock is basically 3 pieces. The stem comes up into a main container. You fill that with water. There's actually a cup that's inverted upside down over the main stem, so that as it ferments, the carbon dioxide pushes through the water, hits the top, and is forced by the rest of the carbon dioxide down through the water and out the sides, back up through. And then there's a cap that has pinholes in it to allow the carbon dioxide to escape. The ambient air does not have enough force to push through the holes in the cap, through the water, back up through the cap and down the stem to put contamination into your must or your work, depending if you're doing wine or beer. And that pretty much is cider making. It's that easy.